The Federal Reserve raises interest rates again in hopes of cooling skyrocketing inflation, which soared to an annual rate of 9.1% in June. But is the Fed's action too little, too late? How likely is the United States to experience a recession by the end of this year? Well, joining us is Rawls College of Business Associate Professor of Economics at Texas Tech University, Alexander Salter. Alexander, it's good to talk with you. So Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says she believes the Fed will be successful in cooling inflation, which saw the highest jump in over 40 years last month. And she believes all of this is only transitory. So should we blame it on the pandemic, Putin? What do you think?
There are a number of factors at play here. Unfortunately, the Federal Reserve is in the role of closing the barn door after the horse has already escaped. Yes, the war in Ukraine matters. Yes, pandemic supply chain issues matter. But the primary culprit for inflation right now is too much money chasing too few goods, which means the primary culprit is the central bank with fiscally profligate politicians assisting them.
Okay, let's look specifically. What role then have minimum wage increases and excessive congressional spending and the printing of money had on inflation and the economy?
Printing money, number one, absolutely no question. From 2020 until now, the money supply increased almost 40%. That's obviously going to put some upward pressure on prices. Congressional spending does matter a little bit. Usually what happens there is the government borrows money to try and stimulate the economy, and then the central bank will buy up all those bonds. And so that's how newly printed money works its way into the economy. Minimum wage increases, I'm not sure that much is driving inflation. That might be causing some employment issues in specific markets, but I'm ultimately not worried about the minimum wage hike causing inflation. Cause number one has got to be easy money.
Well, put on your prediction ahead here. Is a recession coming? How long might it last? How severe do you expect it to be?
That's the question on everyone's mind. And the reason that we're all so confused, we economists, is that output growth is slowing down. In fact, it's even turned negative, but the unemployment rate isn't spiking up. Usually you have employment markets cooling off first, and that's going to be your predictor of a recession. But the unemployment rate is still below 4% in the United States. This would be a highly unusual recession if we had falling GDP while we didn't have widespread job layoffs. So I think that we have a lot of economists scratching their heads right now.
And we still have about 11 million jobs, do we not, that are open and available that are unfilled?
Lots of openings, including manufacturing jobs. So it sure looks like a hot labor market, which is why it's a little bit odd that a hot labor market is coinciding with a hot output market that's coinciding with a cool labor market.
And you recently co-authored an opinion that appeared in the Wall Street Journal where you talked about the moral problem of inflation, and you suggested that we examine the Bible for some guidance. You described inflationary policymakers as modern-day King Davids. Explain.
That's right. We tend to look at inflation as primarily an economic problem, and that's an okay way of looking at it. But we can't ever forget that there are moral aspects associated with inflation. The Old Testament enjoins again and again that there needs to be a fixed and stable value for money in order to promote both right worship and social justice. In the New Testament, St. James's universal letter holds that it is improper to hold back workers' wages. Inflation eats away at workers' wages. It might not be aristocrats or landed magnates who are doing the deprivation of workers' wages this time. It's central bankers and politicians, but it's an injustice nonetheless.
Alexander, so how might applying biblical principles then actually help people when they're paying more for just about everything these days and inflation is making their paycheck shrink? What should they do?
I think we need to focus on the moral imperative of sound money. We have to stop treating money like it's a tool for technocrats to tinker with so they can play at fixing the economy or doing whatever they want with it. Instead, money should be one of the basic rules of the social game. It should be like a ruler, a fixed unit that you always know what the value is going to be so people can more easily plan and carry out their economic expectations. That's how you get strong economic growth. That's how you get social justice.
How about people of faith, Judeo-Christian ethics here? How does that play out in our responsibility to help those who are really suffering right now because of the high inflationary rate?
We do have a responsibility to help the least among us. Christian teaching makes that abundantly clear. And if you look at real wages, which means wages after adjusting for inflation, they've been falling for almost a year. we're robbing the purchasing power of those who can least afford to have economic hardship placed on them. That's why the very first thing that we have to do is stop depreciating the currency.
And do you think things will get a little better as we approach the midterm election?
I sure hope so. I don't want this to continue just for the sake of making political hay out of it one way or another. Unfortunately, all signs that I'm seeing suggest that we're going to see significantly above 2% inflation, which is the Fed's target for the foreseeable future.
Okay, Professor Alexander Salter of Texas Tech's Rawls College. Thanks, Alexander, for sharing your time and insights. We appreciate it.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.